is about to be released from prison, and while everyone, including she, is excited, they're oblivious to the rage smoldering within her. His release is going to unleash everything she's held onto before entering his incarceration. It's not clear how old she is, but she's probably no older than 14. Linda Manz only stood at 4'10" and had an androgynous look, so she looked much younger than she was. She looked closer to 11 or 12, but she was actually 19 when she starred in this. So, CB is a bit of a loner. Sometimes she hangs out with her 2 friends, but she spends a lot of time taking walks by herself. She doesn't like being home because her mother struggles with addiction and her father isn't around. You'll notice CB has scars on her face. Sadly, she was in her father's truck while he was driving under the influence, and that's what he gets locked up for. That's exactly how this film begins. We see the accident, but it's shown to us through a dream she's having. I'm gonna skirt around some details because I don't want to reveal too much, but in that moment, you see what haunts CB. There's another layer to her father's alcoholism and irresponsibility. It's such a jarring introduction because of the nature of their conversation. Then you have the moments before impact and the lives he ruins in a split second. This dream is too much too soon. It's no wonder she gets into all kinds of trouble at school and has such a keen interest in punk rock and Elvis. It's not clear where the film takes place, but it was filmed in Canada, and I assume that's where the story is set. The locations reminded me a lot of the Midwest and southern parts of America. Strangely, CB has a distinctive accent, kind of like a stereotypical New Yorker's, and her father has a similar one. This makes sense though, because she would spend a lot of time with him at work before the accident. He was a trucker, and she would ride in the front with him. She'd spend more time with him than her mother. Her mother, Kathy, is a loser, and I'm not calling her that for being an addict. She's a loser because she's selfish and absent-minded. In the beginning of the film, she's talking to CB about her father getting out of jail, and her new boyfriend is within earshot, listening to her tell CB about how she's only with him because he's a provider. She says he's not as attractive as her husband and is nowhere near his level. Then there's another scene where they're at a bowling alley, and her husband's best friend, Charlie, puts his hands all over her and says disgusting, inappropriate things. You can see the resignation in her boyfriend's eyes, and when he tells her he wants to leave, she berates him as if he was the one who did something wrong. He's not very assertive, and she takes full advantage of that. That's not all. Right before this happens, Charlie sees CB walk in with her friends, and he leers at them with his buddy. He also gets a bit too touchy with CB. She's visibly uncomfortable, but of course he doesn't care because he's a pig. Her mother is completely oblivious to what's going on. It's her mother's selfishness and inattentiveness that lead to further trauma for CB. I think it's important for me to give a few warnings. This isn't a fun movie, and I wish I'd known that from the start. I was trying to take a break from movies like this, and I randomly chose this one, but that was a mistake. I thought I was going to watch a movie about a young girl exploring the punk scene in her area, but that didn't really happen. You'll see the word nihilistic thrown around in different reviews, and I couldn't think of a better one. The moments leading up to the climax blew my mind, especially because of how things had been foreshadowed. This is a film that depicts poverty, addiction, and sexual abuse. It's gonna make you feel miserable, there's just no way around it. One of the saddest things about this movie is that CB wasn't safe with anyone, not even her mother. She couldn't trust her. When Kathy realized what she'd done, it was too late because CB had been pushed to the point where she simply didn't care about anything anymore. The moments leading up to that final scene are some of the most heart-wrenching I've seen in a long time. I felt myself feeling sick and on the verge of tears. That's the level of depravity this story sank to. In essence, this is a cautionary tale about what can happen when a child is repeatedly mistreated or neglected. It made me think of all the problem children who are brought up in toxic households and how easy it is for them to slip through the cracks. Sometimes, these kids just need someone who shows that they care. Many kids are able to turn things around, but when you think about the countless children who will never get a chance, you can't help but feel miserable. I watched a Dennis Hopper interview while writing for this because I didn't know much about him. I learned that he was good friends with James Dean, and Dean encouraged his preferred method of acting. They believed that scenes should be done differently every time, and actors should be given more freedom to perform as they see fit. One could see how that would make certain Hollywood directors bristle up. As it happens, he was banned from Columbia Pictures after his first audition. All throughout his career, Hopper was known for being subversive. It wasn't something he moderated the more he worked with others. In fact, the original director for this film had been fired, and Hopper had to rewrite it from scratch. They reshot it in just 4.5 weeks. Sadly, he was in the throes of addiction while directing this, so I'm sure he must have tapped into that suffering while playing Don. He claimed that substances fueled his creativity, but that should never be the case for anyone, in my opinion. I didn't like Don's character for many reasons. I don't see how anyone could, but his character was all too compelling. Hopper managed to embody the reality of substance abuse, from the poor foresight, a lack of regard for others, and repeated slip-ups. I'm sure Linda Manz related to her character as well. She had had a troubled childhood, didn't know her father, and would constantly run away from home, so I imagine she channeled some of that pain for this role. She captured the duality of a scared young girl who was angry with the world and had to show people not to mess with her, but who also needed nurturance and love. There are these tender moments when she's alone in her room and you see her with her stuffed animals and toys, or she'll be talking to Elvis's ghost out loud. Then there are times when you see her sucking her thumb and speaking to her teddy bear in a loving way. CB can only be vulnerable when she's alone in her room, safe from the world, and that's no way for a kid to live. Hopper has shared how much he looked up to tragic heroes like Rimbaud, and he created CB as a tragic hero of sorts. The way she chose to deal with things, that ending, that was her way of subverting normality, which is something she'd encourage people to do any chance she'd get. This one gets 4 out of 5 stars. I see myself rewatching this many more times. My only criticism is that the voiceovers weren't good in several scenes. There are times when the audio isn't synced up to the actor's mouth movements, but that's a negligible flaw for me. I also would have liked to see CB exploring the punk scene a little more. That was her refuge, so seeing more happy moments for her would have relieved the heaviness. When you think of punk, you don't imagine a teenage girl with a squeaky voice who's only 4'10". But you know how kids are. A lot of them think they're grown. She's no exception. There's this scene where she gets kicked out of a bar by some burly